Hello, everybody, and welcome to another adventure in history. I am your longtime absent host, Shane. I know it has been a minute. It's been like about 2 weeks since I've streamed, period. That was only supposed to be a 1 week stretch, and then I got sick, and the life attacked and it turned into a 2 week time off. But I do feel better. Things have theoretically calmed down. We're kind of trying to get back. I look 2 weeks older. Yeah, you could probably tell in the amount of gray that I've gone, and the fact that my hair is longer because I haven't had a haircut in forever. I'm getting to the point that I need one pretty badly. I'll have to hold myself down and give myself a haircut. I appreciate the fact that I'm obviously exactly 2 weeks older because we know how we age that finely. But no, David, there will be no growing out of the hair. The hair is too long. It will not be grown out. I don't want a man bun. So, Uncle Bill, welcome. I should note before we go any further, Uncle Bill is a scholar among men and was gracious enough to send me another book, and I have been thoroughly enjoying King Solomon's Mines, which is a very very influential novel on a young Tolkien, and I had never read all of it, and I only knew of it sort of in passing, and it has been a great comfort to me in my sickness. It's an interesting book, and I've already come up with things from it that I feel like I could make direct connections to stuff that Tolkien wrote. And I've gone so far as to ask some of the Tolkien scholars that I know if they've ever seen anybody make these connections, because they seem fairly evident to me, which means that they should have seemed evident to other people, which means that somebody else should have published this stuff already. But theoretically speaking, I might actually get publications out of that, so it is much appreciated. Matt, welcome in. How's it going? DCI Banks, as always. How's things? Hope you're doing well. We've got Prof in the room, bringing up the average IQ. Lots of smart people in the room tonight. David, good to see you, man. You tried reading that and you couldn't get past the elephant hunt. I understand that it's a product of its time. Yeah, it's... dude, you're incredibly intelligent, and like being able to recite books is not the only sort of intelligence that's out there. Being able to accurately break down things into geometric shapes and then reproduce those in style is incredibly intelligent. Anyway, yeah, the elephant hunt scene is rough. There are a lot of scenes in the book that are absolutely products of their time. So the book was written in the late 1800s and takes place in South Africa. I guess technically it was written in the early 1900s, but takes place during the 1800s in South Africa. So it is great for the time, but we have to absolutely understand that the British structure at that time was not the same. Cornrows to reach the kids. No thanks. Prof. Everything is going much better. Yesterday was rough. I had to pay for a plumber to fix our water line. That was the biggest drum in a series of unexpected financial outpourings. By the way, this isn't me saying give Shane money. I'm not asking for it. We had it in the bank. We're fine. We're doing okay. but we had to fix our car, and then I had to get medicine, and then we had to pay for the plumber, and it's been like $900 in the last few weeks. So yeah, we're having the same month. Maybe so, man. I hope that you're not having the same month that I'm having. It's been not the funnest, but hopefully we're on the other side of that now, and things are going to be cool, and no more sudden hundreds of dollars of expenditures. The pipe that we got installed yesterday is supposed to last us for longer than we're alive, so hopefully we never have to fix that again, right? Hopefully the repairs on the car are going to fix the problem that has been plaguing the car for the last 2 years. So if we can get through the next week or so without some other surprise thing, I'm going to feel like we're getting sort of back on track. And I really hope that it does. I mentioned this in the Discord, but like the last 3 years, man, has just been this sort of never-ending cycle of family issues that have caused a lot of emotional turmoil, or my personal health, which has gone just bonkers in the last few years after I had COVID, or unexpected monetary issues. We found out that we have had subterranean termites in the hot place in our furnace. Oh no, man. Dude, termites are not fun to deal with, man. I hope they figured that stuff out and they can kill all of those little buggers pretty fast. My hair looks healthy and now I want to cut it off. I mean, I like my hair. It's getting a bit thin up here on the top. If you can see kind of like the good old-fashioned, circular pattern where it's going to end up being gone one day. But got to drill out the concrete and, oh no. Anytime I have to start busting up foundation stuff, man, that is rough. I did take a little bit of time in the down run to poke around with a few things, and I messed around a little bit with my lighting setup, and I messed around a little bit with my streaming resolution, and I messed around a little bit with like my OBS settings. So there's a chance that things might look a little bit sharper. I didn't know if it was necessarily like overtly different, but I felt like it made it a little bit more stable. You got a chicken. And he has makeup on. I don't wear makeup. I will admit that my skin is very greasy, so sometimes I will go into the bathroom and wipe my face off with a hand towel before I get on stream so that I don't shine, to give myself a little bit more of a matte feeling, right? So, I do what I can, right? Shine bright like a diamond. Okay. All right, so we're here on a Tuesday, which means it's viewer request night. And the particular viewer request that we're going to be doing tonight came from one of our very own, which all viewer requests do, but this came from DCI Banks, who initially asked me to do the history of Malta, which is a bit longer than I could fit into one stream because it goes all the way back to like Neolithic times and comes all the way up to modern day. And that's a bit much. So after some discussion, it got narrowed down specifically to the Knights of Malta, which you can see here, which is much more manageable, and even then is still going to be a little bit more than normal, but it's okay because sometimes we can go a little bit more than a Matt feeling. Yeah. Well, Shane is my middle name, so it's not actually my full name. And their sports team, the Falcons. Yeah, the Maltese Falcons. Really interesting thing about actual Maltese Falcons. There was, and this is a big spoiler. It's not actually a big spoiler. It's just something that we'll cover later on, and I probably wouldn't have actually mentioned it except for David brought up Maltese Falcons. They actually were rather important in, especially courts in the sort of like the late Renaissance period, they were very, very good at hunting. So Maltese falcons were actually considered to be sort of like luxury pets. And the islands that make up Malta were sort of leased to the Knights of Malta by the Holy Roman Empire for the price of one falcon a year. And I actually do quite love the Maltese Falcon. It's the movie that I give as an example for early use of a MacGuffin. So if you're trying to learn about film tropes and you want to understand what a MacGuffin is, I always tell people to watch Maltese Falcon. And this is sort of like it's not the first movie that ever did this, but it's a very, very old one that did it really, really well. So I actually quite like Maltese Falcon. No, they didn't call everybody sweetheart. And he doesn't actually do that ridiculously thick accent in Maltese Falcon. It's a quite good movie. I watched it not too terribly long ago. I guess now it's been closer to probably a decade, but I was actually showing that to some younger friends of mine who had never seen a lot of the older movies, and they were like, let's watch some old movies. And I was like, yeah, buddy. So 39 Steps is another. Yeah. That's a good one, too. Still think I'd go with Maltese Falcon. It's paced a little bit better. Yeah. It's a little bit more streamlined, I think, than 39 Steps. But that's not to like poop on 39 Steps. It's just a little bit more tight. A little bit better editing. But yeah, so we're going to do the Knights of Malta. And when we talk about the Knights of Malta, we have to start about, back in the beginning when they actually started. So where did these people come from in the first place? Why is there a holy order of knights? What's the deal behind this whole concept? Where did they come from? Well, all the way back in the 11th century, so this is in the 1000s, one of the things that was happening quite a bit in the area that we see here on the map was Europeans trying to travel to the Holy Land for Christian pilgrimage. But there were problems with that. Most notably, the area was not held by Christian forces. This is before the Crusades. And second off, it's a very arduous trek if you're going to try to make it from Europe all the way over to the Holy Land. If you're going to go by foot, that's a big march and takes weeks and weeks of time. And if you're even going to go by boat, it can be a very troublesome trip depending on the time of the year that you're going, because the currents of the Mediterranean are very, very unsaleable for big portions of the year. You just do not want to be in a boat on the Mediterranean for months out of the year. And if you did catch one of these storms, it was usually rather violent. And anyway, getting to the Holy Land was tough. And once you got there, because the region, especially around Jerusalem, was not held by Christians, there weren't necessarily going to be a lot of people there that were amenable to helping you out. So there were some Italian monks that were from a region called Amalfi, and this is the coastline of Italy, just sort of south of Rome. Today it's a huge tourist destination. A lot of people go to the Amalfi coast in Italy for beach sort of stuff, right? Beautiful area, very, very beautiful. But some of the people there knew about the pilgrim stuff and decided that they were going to try to start a hospital in Jerusalem. And they had to go to the Egyptians. The Egyptians at the time controlled the Holy Land, and they had to go ask the leader of the Egyptian government for his sort of blessing to start a hospital. And this was also going to have a monastery and a nunnery and a chapel, like a church that goes along with it. And the way that they initially pitched this was, we're going to open a hospital for anybody. It didn't really matter which faith they were, if they were Muslim or Christian or Jewish or whatever. They were just going to open a hospital, and this was going to be supported by donations from people that were coming to visit, but also Europeans that knew that the hospital was there and could give money that way. So it wasn't going to cost the Egyptians any money. and this was potentially going to help out their own people if the hospital was open for everybody. So he gives the okay, and in the year 1048, they have themselves a hospital. Now, this is going to start a group called the Hospitalers, and the Hospitalers themselves are going to end up sprouting lots of different groups. The Knights Hospitaller are not all going to be Knights of Malta. They're all going to be sort of based around these ideas of hospitals, but they're not all going to be the same. So if you see Knights Hospitaller, it's not always indicating a group that goes on to be the Knights of Malta, but a large portion of them do. But it's around this time that they start using this symbol. And this, of course, is a very, very famous symbol. And today, we even refer to this in many cases as the Maltese Cross. That's not exactly the original name of the symbol, though this does become synonymous with the Knights of Malta. This particular is an 8-pointed star, and this has quite a bit of religious symbolism behind it. The 8 points of the star are supposed to represent the 8 different Beatitudes. So if you are familiar with the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, "Blessed are the blank," right? So this is the blessed are the meek. Oh, good. They've been run down quite a bit. The meek. This is blessed are the cheesemakers, right? And of course, that's a metaphor for blessed are all those who make dairy products. But you know the Beatitudes from the Sermon on the Mount. So each point is supposed to represent one of those. But this was sort of the mission of the knights. At that point, they weren't even knights. They were just monks running a hospital, right? So we're just going to run ourselves a hospital, and we're going to take care of people. But this is going to change substantially about 50 years later when the Crusades start. When the Crusades show up and the crusading armies come over and they conquer this region for Christianity, the knights in the hospital in Jerusalem is going to take on much more of a militant feel, because a lot of the people that they're going to end up taking care of are going to be crusaders who are fighting against Muslims. And it's around this time that it starts being a little bit more of a military order, because it turns out that if you've got a lot of people that are Christians that are already inside of Jerusalem and they're not really super interested in leaving because they're running this hospital, they can be persuaded to stand on the walls and fight. And you're going to start seeing a bit of a tweak here from we just save people's lives to, and we'll kill the bad guys too. This is an interesting twist here, because you don't always see this kind of tropey, right? The good doctor that decides to start killing folks. I'm reminded here of Shepherd Book and him saying that his religion was a little bit gray on the area of kneecaps, right? It also gave name to a common crystal type. When you get a Maltese cross, you get a Maltese cross when growing organic crystal. You have to start over because you cannot deduce its 3D structure by diffraction. Okay, so first off, hey, Lumpy, good to see you. Second off, you're really smart, because I don't understand what you're saying. I could try to interpret what you're saying, and basically you do what you do, and you want to be able to make sure that you can map something 3D, because you're going to have to determine how it folds and all the little points of it, so that when you produce the molecule at the end, it looks the way that it needs to do the reaction that it needs to. But I don't know all of those terms. But, you know, good stuff. Okay, so we're going to start fighting a little bit more as Knights Hospitaller. And this is when the stuff really starts to kick up. So by the time we get to about the year 1113, so this is about 80 years or so after they had been founded, the Pope is going to expand the charge for the monks running this hospital, and he's going to extend to them the charge to not just take care of pilgrims that are in Jerusalem, but also to protect the entire route that connects Europe to Jerusalem. And what this is going to do is expand their calling. So now they're going to have to keep the passages of pilgrimage open. And this is a fairly difficult task, especially given the time period that we're talking about, because in the 1100s, there are still substantial amounts of fighting going on between Muslim forces who are attempting to retake the Crusader states and the Crusader states that are fighting for survival. And the way that the knights are going to do this is they're going to start establishing different houses in different parts of the European world, and these are going to basically be places where you can meet up with some knights that might help you on your journey, but you can also sort of plan your trip on pilgrimage between the system of some of these houses. And they're called houses, but they're basically just like short stay hotels that are kind of like your stereotypical medieval inn, where you can show up and get some food and you can stay a few nights on your journey. But the kicker here is that you're going to potentially have armed knights that are going to be riding with you or marching with you to keep you safe along the way. This is where everybody knows your name, right? Remembering that Dr. Mumbinga in Strange New Worlds turned out to be a killing machine. Yeah, there we go, right? This is when you go on a cruise and they have set up... Yeah, exactly, Maddie. This is it. Like, this is where you get off the boat and you know exactly where you have to go eat, right? Because you just showed them your boarding pass or your little app that you've got your ticket on and you eat for free, right? It's kind of like that. No, you're good. This is great. So the expansion of their task is going to also bring a lot of attention to them. And this is going to swell their ranks, and it's going to also bring a lot of people from different regions into the group. This is also going to start bringing more money into the group, because as these individual houses get set up across Europe and then along the way over to the Holy Land, people are just going to run into Knights Hospitaller more frequently. And the familiarity and the very tangible service that they were offering is really a bonus to people going, hey, I've got some money left over. I should give it to these people because they're doing the Lord's work, right? And as we get further into the Crusader States stuff, the fighting part of the Knights Hospitaller is going to become much more evident, and they get very heavily involved in a lot of the big fighting stuff. This was the height of Yojo. You only Jerusalem once, right? I mean, if you're going to go, you got to go once, right? You got to make the trek if you can. But the fighting part is going to become much more important, especially as reinforcements from Europe become harder to get, and especially as the threat to the Crusader states become infinitely more tangible in reality, because they're falling apart, right? The Crusader states start falling in the 1100s, and by the time we get through the 1200s, there's not really many of them left, and by the time we get to the 1290s, there's basically only the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and it's not in a good state. This is, of course, during the Third Crusade. When Jerusalem falls... What up, Casey? When Jerusalem falls in 1291, this is a huge blow to the Knights Hospitaller, and this is going to sort of start being the point where they're going to stop just generically being referred to as Knights Hospitaller, and you're going to start seeing individual groups that are going to go on to be the Knights of Malta. Because some of them are going to kind of give up the urge to stay in Jerusalem when it falls back to Muslim forces, but some of them are going to continue fighting. So some of them sort of disperse out through different parts of Europe, but others are going to stick with the armies. And there are Knights Hospitaller at the Siege of Acre, which is kind of like the really big culminating battle in the end of the Third Crusade. This is 1293, and after the Siege of Acre ends up effectively ending with a draw. I mean, the Crusaders take the city, but it's like this is kind of the end. You know, Jerusalem is in the hands of Salah ad-Din, and the Crusade forces are kind of gone. And anyway, it's I take your city back, and then you take my city, and you try to defend this. Anyway, if you're more interested in the Third Crusade, we did a viewer request stream for that back earlier this year, so it's not too far back in the VODs. But anyway, this is going to sort of be the end of the Knights Hospitaller in the Holy Land, because their base of operations is going to end up falling back into Muslim control, and their numbers are pretty dramatically reduced. So where do we go? Well, the first stopover was Cyprus. And this might not seem like it was the best place to go at the time, but Cyprus was actually, at that time, still in the hands of Christian forces, but it was an independent kingdom, and because of the leadership of the Knights and the leadership of the Kingdom of Cyprus, we're going to end up with problematic relationships here. So if you know anything about the sort of end of the medieval period, you'll know that one of the big things that starts happening is a rift between different factions of Catholicism, right? What up, Evo? Just wanted to say hi. You're not dead yet. Oh yeah, that's cool. Huntsville's not too far from me, so I don't know if you're still around, but if you drive through 601 area code, you won't be too far from me. Divided we fall. What up, hydrocannabinoid? Welcome. So they move over to Cyprus, and they have a small force, but it's not particularly even half of what they used to be. But because they had, they being at this point the Knights, because the Knights had a papal sanction to be independent, they had a lot of unilateral authority. And this amount of authority did not sit well with the King of Cyprus, and there are early nationalist issues. Most notably, at the time, the Knights Hospitaller was being run by a particular family called the Valletta family, who were French. I couldn't find any reliable pictures or statues of these guys, but I did decide that I needed to show this. This is the coat of arms of the Valletta family. It's 3 crows sitting on 3 hills. And I don't get it, and I don't really know why that's their coat of arms, but it's bizarre enough that I just needed to show that. Oh, it's the French. Look, we can see the crows on the hills. Duh. Anyway, just a little tidbit because, I like showing pictures and, send me a DM on Discord as soon as you figure out. Cool. I don't know if I'll just be able to pack up and go, but it'd be really neat to meet up. So the relationship here on Cyprus is very testy. And the mix of French and English on Cyprus was a bit of a mess because Cyprus at that time had been conquered partially by Richard the Lionheart on the way to the Third Crusade, and of course we still have a lot of Italian influence here. It just doesn't sit very well, and they're going to fight a lot with the Cyprus nobility, so they're I guess Cypriot would be the correct adjective there. I apologize. So they decide that they're going to move, but where to move to? Because you just can't pick up and move an entire militant order. You just can't park these in anybody's backyard and expect people to figure out, oh, I'm super happy with you being here. Thanks for showing up, right? So where do they go? Well, they decide that they're going to move to Rhodes. Now, here's the thing about... they don't even go to the school. Yeah, exactly. Here's the thing about Rhodes. So this is the island of Rhodes, and it's here off of the coastline of Anatolia. Rhodes at the time was an interesting island because it was held by Muslim forces on partial part of the island, but it was still claimed by the Byzantines. And the guy that was running the knights at the time, this guy named Fulk de Villeret. Fulk is such a great name if you're French. You could probably guess that I almost titled the stream tonight "What the Folk," but I didn't think that would be appropriate. Anyway, Folk decides we can take roads, and we can take roads for Christ. There's a big problem with that. When you start trying to take roads, the Byzantines are like right there, and they already had a very strained relationship with the Crusader groups in the first place, because theoretically speaking, all of those Crusader kingdoms were supposed to be turned back over to the Byzantines. So the Byzantines weren't a big fan of these people, and now here is another Crusader force that's taking more land that's supposed to be Byzantine. So there's a big old war over Rhodes, and the knights are going to end up taking Rhodes over the course of 2 years. This is 1308 to 1310. And when they get there, one of the first things they decide to do is we need to make sure that we can hold this forever, right? It's a colossus, pretty much, right? Very scholarly. It doesn't look like it has any more roads than any other island. Ha ha ha. What would Christ take at Rhodes? Well, I can tell you, Christ, according to the knights, would take all of it. We could take it for Christ. There's a big problem with that. Not the least being Jesus was but when you take Rhodes, and you know that the Byzantines are very angry with you for taking more of their territory, and you decide that you're going to take it anyway, you've got to take precautions in case the Byzantines show up. And how do you do that? Well, you build this thing. This is Fort San Angelo, and this is a big old fortified position on the island of Rhodes that the knights build. At this point, they're being referred to as the Knights of Rhodes because they have taken Rhodes now. Technically, they're still the Order of St. John, which is their technical name, but everybody starts referring to as the Knights of Rhodes because they took over the island. It is just a big old fort. It's a big old fort, but what's cool here, because we have the power of the Google Earth, we can do this. Nope, not that one. Where are these big forts? You can still see them. I should have looked this up ahead of time. Anyway, big fort energy, yeah. They fortify the crap out of the island of Rhodes. Big old stuff, right? Yeah, those are ferry lines. You can go to Rhodes today. I've never actually been to Rhodes. It would be pretty cool to go to. How many were there? There must have taken hundreds of people to build quick. They were thousands at that point. And they had a lot of interest. They received some support from the Pope, which is kind of sketchy. They got some reinforcements from some Genoese ships that were going to help them move from Cyprus to Rhodes. And they got a bit of an infusion of cash from some powers in Europe to assist them with taking the island. Interesting thing here, though, and how big should we make these walls? Yes. What up, Matt? How's it going? The point here is they don't want to give this island back up, and the Byzantines are very upset about this. And when we decide that we're going to take the island and we're going to expand our power, well, we decide that we're going to do that via naval power. And what's really kind of interesting here is that the Knights of Rhodes are going to become a naval power. And you really don't see basically any other militant order of Catholic knights have this motion towards naval power. You could look at the Teutonic Order, and I mean, they had some ships to move people around for sure, but they didn't really have like a fighting navy. Neither did the Templar. They just didn't have this big fighting navy. But the Knights of Rhodes at this time are going to sort of lean into the military power on the water. And this is really interesting because one of the groups that gets attracted to them because of this stuff is the English. And of course, the English at the time have one of the best navies on Earth. And this is going to be some sort of tangential aid towards building up a navy. If you've got people that are going to be in contact with people in England that have good timber, that have good boat building skills, that are going to be able to give you money or support, this is good stuff. So what they're going to do is build up a navy, and they're going to start taking islands in the Mediterranean. And this is pretty interesting because you can see other militant orders taking land, but it's almost always on foot. The Teutonic Order, of course, is going to go up into the northern and eastern parts of Europe and conquer over the invasion routes of the 10th, 11th, 12th Crusade stuff up in the northern part of Europe. But these guys are basically building marines. And it's pretty interesting because you just don't see this very much. So a lot of these islands that are here in the Mediterranean, off the coast of Greece, off the coast of the Byzantine world, they're going to end up taking them, and they're going to get over here towards Malta, right? The Marines of Malta. So we're not quite there yet, but we'll get there in just a bit. This is Malta over here, but this time we're going to start fighting off people here, and they're going to start taking it back to the Muslim forces. They're going to participate in some campaigns against Egypt. They're going to participate in some of the smaller crusade activities towards the coast of the Holy Land, but they're also going to start taking stuff in Anatolia. There's a big battle at a city called Smyrna that they end up taking completely for themselves. This is in 1344, under the guise of one of the papally ordered crusader movements. They're going to go show up and land and take the entire city and turn Smyrna into one of their outposts. What's really interesting here, the ancient name for this is Halicarnassus, and if you're familiar with the no, it's not. Today it's called Halicarnassus. Back then it was Smyrna. But if you're familiar with the mausoleum of Halicarnassus, this is one of the ancient wonders of the world. The big fortification that they build in Halicarnassus or Smyrna uses some of the blocks from the mausoleum in Halicarnassus as spoila to help construct their fortifications. So it was pagan anyway, so Jesus won't mind if we use the pagan's stone to build our big fort, right? So they're sort of expanding all over the region, and this is sort of bringing them a lot of attention, and they're getting a lot of support. Their numbers are growing. They're still doing some stuff when it comes to running different outposts and helping people on pilgrimage, but most of their focus now is on holding this territory and fighting battles to take more, which is, again, kind of interesting. They are going to sort of continuously run into the Byzantines. The Byzantines really, really, really don't like these guys. Again, they're sort of just right off the coast holding their territory. They don't care for it very much at all. It's a big old mess. Not fun, not peaceful, not good relationships here. Now, this is going to also draw attention from other Muslim powers. If you are as big as the Knights of Malta were in the time period, you're not going to be able to skirt under the radar. And especially when they start building the naval side of their world, they're going to start dealing a lot in trade, and they make money guarding trade routes and participating in trade as well. But this is where they're going to run into one of their arch nemesis that they're going to basically fight for about the next 400 years, and those are the good old-fashioned Barbary pirates. If you're familiar with the Barbary pirates, they were a group that was roughly stationed here along the coastline of northern Africa, along the coves of the Mediterranean, that would launch raids from the Barbary coast into the Mediterranean, mostly targeting Christian shipping. Not Barbados. Not Barbados. That's potentially common misconception because of the Barbary. But here, Barbary coast refers to the people that were called the Berbers. And if you're more interested in the Berbers, we did a viewer request on them earlier this year, or maybe that was the very end of last year. But the Berber people live here in northern Africa, specifically right around this region. Most of the Berbers in the world are going to live like right around here. Now, some of them live down in this area and over in here, but most of them are going to be like right around here. The Berber money, yeah, pretty much. In another universe, there's a Gilbert and Sullivan opera called The Barbary Coast. You've been there. Where is there? Like Tripoli? Yeah, someone cued the Marine Corps theme. So, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. So, Tripoli is in Tunisia. See that one high Atlas mountain? That's where you've been. Oh, rural Morocco. Oh, that's really cool, man. Morocco is amazing. I'd love to go to Morocco. That'd be really friggin' cool. There's a lot of cool stuff over there. Lot of really cool ancient history stuff that I would just be about. So, anyway, the Barbary pirates are going to become a thorn in the side of our knights, and this is going to be a deep-seated hatred that's going to again last about 400 years. These guys just don't get along very well at all, and they're going to be a constant threat. Now, what's interesting here about the Barbary pirates versus the Knights of Rhodes, the pirates are never going to completely be an existential threat. The pirates aren't really interested in showing up to Rhodes and taking the land and claiming it as their own. They're just a constant annoyance, and it really gets under the skin of the Knights of Rhodes. There's an old Crusader castle and fort in Rabat. You've been to Marrakesh. Yeah, I need to go. There are so many places in Africa that I would just love to go. I was actually talking about this with a colleague last week. I'd love to go to Algeria. There are like one of the best preserved late antique Roman cities is in Algeria, and it was one of the cities where the Romans sort of just like left en masse, and it is in such good levels of conservation, and it's huge. It's almost the entire city. It's one of the few places on Earth where you can really walk down the streets of ancient Roman cities. But you know, I want to go everywhere, and I just can't pack up and go. It would be really cool if I could, but it just doesn't work that way. Anyway, we're talking about where Shane wants to go on vacation, and the answer usually is pretty much anywhere. Now, by the time we get to the 1400s, the Knights of Rhodes had become such a big issue that they were starting to draw heat from the big old powers, like Egypt. And in the 1440s, you've been to the historical museum there in Chela and Rabat. Very cool. By the 1440s, the larger Muslim forces have decided these guys have just got to go, and the leader of the Egyptian Muslim forces at this time decided that they're just going to invade. So they bring this giant invasion up to the island of Rhodes, and they're going to try to land and lay siege to the fortifications there. But they're going to end up being repelled. Now, what's interesting is that the forces of the knights on land at that point was not even close, really, to the number of soldiers that Egypt was bringing to bear, but the fortifications are going to be the key, and that's going to be like the game changer. So, after that failure, other big Muslim leaders go, oh man, we really need to... we really need to take them. And now that I'm looking through my photos, I forgot to show you this. This is Bodrum Castle. This is the castle that they built in Smyrna. Which, again, is like Halicarnassus. So you can see these when they build these castles, the Knights of Rhodes aren't playing around. They're building serious fortified positions. I should have shown you that earlier. I apologize. This guy now is going to cause some trouble for a lot of people in the world. This is Sultan Mehmet II, and he is more famously known as Mehmet the Conqueror. And Mehmet the Conqueror is called the Conqueror because he is the guy that finally brings down the Byzantines. In 1453, Mehmet and his army are going to take Constantinople and end the Byzantine Empire. And what's really interesting here is that Mehmet decides, okay, cool, I've taken Constantinople. This is like the this is like the crown jewel of Christianity in the East, and I'm going to take it. So I'm going to go also take Rhodes. And in 1480, Mehmet decides, I'm just going to go take Rhodes, and he invades. He can't do it either. And this is sort of a crazy kind of thing to think about here. He took Constantinople, which was one of the best defended cities on earth. And when he tried to take Rhodes, he couldn't do it. Part of that, of course, is because of Constantinople does have a land attachment to it, so you can march your armies up to it. It's a lot harder to march an army up to an island. But Mehmet has a substantial amount of force here, and he can't take Rhodes either. So when Mehmet holds out, the Knights of Rhodes are kind of like, gotcha. And they get a bit of a reprieve for about 40 years. Nobody else really feels like it's something to do to go try to fight these guys. Because, it's just crazy. Like, how did they hold out against all of this stuff? Big fortifications is the answer. But there's another guy coming, and he's going to be a little bit of a different flavor because he's an Ottoman, and he is a super power leader, and he's also got, in every picture that you ever see him in, he's got this big old hat. This guy is Suleiman, who is very frequently referred to as Suleiman the Magnificent. And he is going to come to power in the Ottoman world in the early 1500s. What up, Noger? And this guy is a wrecking ball. He hides the wrecking ball in the turban. Suleiman is scary as mess. He takes over and conquers giant chunks of the Balkan Peninsula. When he starts invading Europe, he gets all the way to Vienna. So he's going to take pretty much all of this Balkan Peninsula stuff and gets all the way up here to this pass in the mountains. And if we put on our borders and labels, you'll see Vienna sits right here in this pass of the mountains. And it took a combination of basically the entire Habsburg force of all of Europe to go basically free up the siege of Vienna. For if Suleiman had won, he would have gotten into northern and central Europe, and goodness knows what would have happened after that. This guy is big and scary. Suleiman is the boogeyman in European dreams. When he decides to take Rhodes, he comes packed to the gills. He's not going to go try to take Rhodes and fail. And in 1522, he shows up with 40,000 troops to take the island. And he is going to lay siege to the island, and he is going to force the knights out of Rhodes. And this is a sort of a tactical decision that they made. They recognize that their position is not one that's going to be held, and they are going to basically call parley and sort of slink off in defeat. Now, when they get run off of Rhodes, this is in the 1500s, 1522 is when they lose Rhodes. When they get run off of Rhodes, they're not going to have any home here. Like a lot of the islands that they're dealing with or used to hold here in the Mediterranean had been taken by Muslim forces. They don't have Smyrna anymore over here in Anatolia. So they're going to have to go all the way over here into the Western Mediterranean to try to find Christians that would take them in. And they end up here in Sicily. It always feels like the Crusades is pre-Columbus. Well, the vast majority of them are. And at this point, they're not really calling Crusades so much anymore. We're about to run into things where the Pope starts organizing these things that he calls the Holy Leagues, which are basically going to be like the Christian Avengers that they put together for special forces kind of operations. And the Knights are actually going to play a role in some of these. But anyway, they end up over here in Sicily. And Sicily is sort of like the closest island that they can get to where they feel like they can, pull up in some Christian waters and territory. And at this time, there aren't very many of them left overall. It's hard to know exactly how many of them survived the big battle against Suleiman, but the estimates are fewer than 7,000 total. So it's still a fairly sizable army, right? This is not like nothing, but here's the thing. That 7,000 is 7,000 total spread across all of the Christian world. So it's not like they had a concentrated army of 7,000 fighting men. When they get to Sicily, they realize really quickly that the political situation there isn't going to last very much either. Because here's the thing. By this point, the leadership of the Knights had gone pretty fully over into the French hands, and French people living in Italian territory, you can already imagine how this is going to be problematic, especially because at this time period there's a lot of arguing between French and Italian Catholics, because this is during the Avignon papacy period where the Catholic Church is going to split and there are two popes, where there's one pope in France and one pope in Rome. And you can obviously tell then a whole bunch of French people aren't going to have a lot of favor with a whole bunch of Italian people, right? So what do? Well, you got to find somewhere to go. And it's around this time that they actually get a rather lucky benefactor. And that is going to be this guy. And we've talked about this guy multiple times on stream. But this is Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor. Actually, if you were with us on our last viewer request stream, when we were talking about Magellan, we spoke about Charles V here, Holy Roman Emperor. This is also the guy that was trying to kill Martin Luther. Is that a collared shirt? Yeah, he's got a collar. He's got a sort of an overcoat here that comes up pretty high, and then a white shirt that comes out as a collar. And then, of course, a stole here of fur. I suspect that would be fur. Charles V. Now, Charles V is going to become one of the most powerful men on Earth during this period of time. He's the guy that finally beats Suleiman, by the way. He ends up inheriting he ends up in control of the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, which was originally a Norman kingdom that grew out of Norman conquests here in southern Italy and the island of Sicily. But this territory ends up falling into the hands of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. And he knows that the Knights Hospitaller are sort of stuck on Sicily and that they're having some trouble. So he decides that he's going to be beneficent, and he throws them a bone. And this is where he moves the Knights of Rhodes to Malta. And Malta today is this basically this very small selection of 3 islands here in the Mediterranean. And this is going to become the new headquarters of the Knights of Malta, who, of course, are, this is the whole point of us talking about Knights of Malta in the first place, right? So what do? Well, we're going to take over, and we're going to try our best to make sure that we can hold this territory, right? It's a very small set of land, and it's not a lot of territory, and it's going to be hard because of its proximity to Muslim forces here in northern Africa, especially those blasted Barbary pirates who are now basically in our back door. And there's a lot of suspicion that the reason Charles V suggested Malta as a base for the Hospitallers / Knights of Rhodes / now Knights of Malta, is that they already had an established background with beating up the Barbary pirates. So he was like, if I put them here, they're going to be able to continue their work, and they're going to be right next door to the Barbary coast. And every time those pirates set sail, the Knights of Malta now are going to be right there to beat the crap out of them. So this is some three-dimensional chess going on here by Charles V. It wasn't just pure, oh, I'm a great guy. He didn't do just great guy stuff. He played the long game for a lot of this stuff. Anyway, so we're going to get Malta. This is in 1530 is when they officially move in and make Malta their capital. Now, they were, at that point, greatly diminished. A lot of the knights did not like the idea of moving around. This is, of course, it's almost 10 years after they were run off of the island of Rhodes. And they may have only had 1,000 total knights at this point. It was a very small force. But they're going to set up shop, and they're going to make the best of what they have. And what's really interesting is they're going to start operating a lot more unilaterally under this papal sanction, because they still have a papal sanction going all the way back to 1113 that gives them autonomy. They are an autonomous group that can choose their own leadership. That's changed a little bit in recent times just because they rewrote their constitution. But at this time period, they can do a lot of stuff without asking for European nobility permission, because they have this sort of guise of being on their own. And they start doing stuff here to kind of play the long game. And one of the things that they do is build a mint on the island of Malta. And they do this specifically because they're going to start advertising themselves as a safe port for Christians in the region. And if you're going to pull over, you would like money that isn't necessarily as wrapped up in politics as French money or Italian money. Because here's the thing, when the French go to war, they debase their coinage. And when the Italians go to war, they debase their coinage. But the Knights of Malta, while they might be a militant order, are going to sort of pivot here a little bit. And they're going to look a lot more towards, I guess, finance. And this is a bit of a page out of the old Knights Templar book. But if you have a mint, you're going to be able to make your own money. And people are going to trust that money. Because theoretically speaking, you are above the political fray. You're not supposed to be wrapped up in the larger politics. Yeah, the OG crypto bros, right? The islands are not great for agriculture, but the marine biodiversity is excellent. Lumpy, have you been to Malta, or do you just know of Malta? I believe DCI Banks has been to Malta. I have a close colleague. You read, that's fair. I have a very close colleague that went to Malta a couple of years ago and sent pictures back that made me incredibly jealous. Yeah, Malta would be really, really cool. I would really love to go to Malta. You basically have to get to Sicily, and you basically have to get on a ferry from Sicily to get to Malta. I think you can fly in directly, but I would suspect that the flights directly to Malta are astronomically high. I wouldn't mind going to Sicily, though. I've never been to Sicily, and there is just a ton of history on Sicily. That would be really cool to do. So, like, combo trip, Sicily and Malta, sign me up, right? Sign me up. Anybody wants a tour guide? Flights tend to have high in the air to avoid cars. Yeah, pretty much. Apparently, Valletta is a party city. It wasn't at the time. It didn't even exist at this time. It did not even exist as a city at this point. But we're getting closer to that. Okay, so they get Malta. They start fortifying Malta. They start making their own money, and they start rebuilding their order. And this makes the Ottomans not happy. Especially Suleiman, who is still alive at this point, despite conquering most of Eastern Europe and a big portion of the Middle East. This is, of course, in part of the Ottoman Empire becoming the Ottoman Empire, right? This is when the Ottoman Empire were the scary, scary, scary bad guys that nobody wanted to deal with. So Suleiman hears that the Knights have reformed, that they're in Malta, and he takes this personally, right? Like, this is the Michael Jordan, I took that personally meme situation here. So Suleiman decides, we're going to go kill him. But first, we're going to get a raid from... that's not a raid, that's a subscription. Tuna. Iron Spartacus. Tuna, thank you so much for the subscription, my friend. You are a great supporter, not just of the stream, but of me personally. Tuna sent me this little message the other day, and he had no idea that I was super bummed out. And I got this little message where Tuna was like, I appreciate you, and I appreciate your time, and it meant a lot, and I appreciate you too, man. But thanks for the subscription. You'd want to go to Sicily just for the food. Heck yeah, Matt. I dig it. Right? We could go to all of the Godfather sets, which I don't actually think are in Sicily. Did they actually film The Godfather in Sicily? I don't actually know that. Anyway, so there's a story about a bomb falling into a church in Malta and then sliding across the floor to the altar and not exploding. Huh. Yeah, Valletta got bombed pretty badly during World War II. A lot of the really cool buildings got wrecked. It's very unfortunate. Very, very beautiful stuff got destroyed by the bombing campaigns. Anyway, so Suleiman decides it's time for round 2. And he packs up another big old army in 1565, and he sets off to conquer Malta because he just isn't going to let these guys go. And this is referred to as the Great Siege of Malta, and Suleiman apparently brings thousands of ships and tens of thousands of soldiers and is just assaulting these fortified positions on Malta day after day after day. The siege goes on for months. And what's really interesting here is that Suleiman apparently didn't actually know how many people the Knights had inside their big fortifications. He was apparently convinced that they had thousands of people inside of these forts that were going to basically perpetually be able to refit the walls in defense. And so Suleiman, after months and months and months and months of fighting, basically decides that he's going to have to call it quits. And so he packs up and leaves. But what he didn't know is that he had worn the Knights of Malta down to basically nothing. By the time that he left, they had 600 or fewer men, period. And this isn't just like they had 600 knights. No. They had 600 able-bodied men on the entire island. They just all happened to be inside of the big forts holding off Suleiman. And if he had kept pushing on them for even just a little bit more, they would have collapsed. But they held out, and they defied Suleiman. And this is a big deal, because this is kind of like revenge for Rhodes, right? Like, you may have beaten us the first time, but we will not be beaten again. And this would be a really great story if you wanted to do a period history piece where you have a young knight who signs up right as they're moving into Rhodes, and he joins the Knights of Malta, or who are the Knights of Rhodes. He joins the Militant Order of St. John, right? And he asks how things are, and then as soon as he asks how things are, Suleiman shows up with the army and takes Rhodes after this big battle, and they have to run away. and then that guy works his way up to be the leader of the order, who defies Suleiman at Malta, and the ending scene is like him standing unbeaten on the ramparts looking out, and Suleiman looking from the deck of his ship as he sails away, and then it cuts to black. It's great, you know. I think that would be a great movie. I think it would be a really great movie. It'll only get one season and not have a conclusion. Movie. Movie. Not Netflix miniseries, because Netflix would blow the budget out and then cancel it after one season. Right? Comic book incoming, right? I think this would be a great story. Better than Kingdoms of Heaven. Couldn't be too much worse than Kingdom of Heaven. Anyway, so 1565, we survive Suleiman. What do we do then? Well, you rebuild. And when you survive Suleiman, you get a big old name for yourself, because this is something that literally millions of Christians had not been able to do across Europe. Here's the Knights of Malta holding out against the boogeyman, right? And this is going to bring tons of support. This is going to bring a lot of money in. This is going to bring a lot of new converts and people that are going to join the order. And what they decide to build is fortifications. They start building fortifications almost all the way around the island. Both of the big islands and some of the smaller islands. They're going to build huge walls. They're going to build giant forts. They're going to build towers everywhere. They're going to build water supply moving so that they can make sure that even if they are sieged, that they have water that can be fresh and accessed within the walls of the fortifications. They are going to dig in, and they are basically going to say, you're not getting us off this island. This is when they found the city of Valletta, which is going to become the most important city in Malta, and today is the capital of the independent country of Malta. When you go full tank in SimCity, yeah, pretty much, right? We're going to stop worrying about building technology, and we're just going to build walls and guns and stuff like that. And they actually do start putting cannons on a lot of their walls, and this is, of course, when gunpowder is becoming much more common in military activity. They're going to lean into that pretty heavily, right? This is a good time for the Knights of Malta. They are going to have a lot of prestige. Their mint is going to do very well. They're going to oversee a lot of trade coming through their ports. This is going to create a lot of good nature towards them. Still won't keep the Titans out. Yeah, you know. You can't always beat the Titans. You have to have your little zippy pack and pew 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 around and like chop the back of their heads, but you know, that's the anime. Anyway, there's still going to be targets on the backs though. The Barbary pirates are still jerks. Other Ottoman forces that are not Suleiman later are still going to be pains in their neck. They're going to repel various other smaller attacks. But what's interesting here is that after about 50 years of smaller scale attacks, people basically just go, it's not even worth attacking Malta. Right? It's just not even worth losing the men to try to take these islands. You're just not going to do it. They're basically floating fortresses. And they're going to start participating in a lot of these Holy League activities. So again, by the time we get to the late 1500s, there is a bit of a Christian reconquista of Eastern Europe that is spearheaded by a succession of popes who are going to start calling for Christian military unifications to fight off Ottoman advance. And there's going to be referred to as Holy Leagues. And specifically, the Knights are also going to participate in naval battles because they start rebuilding their navy. They're going to be part of a really big battle called Lepanto. It's one of the largest naval battles in history. The Battle of Lepanto is particularly important because it's what's going to break Ottoman naval control over the Mediterranean. A big portion of the Ottoman fleet is going to be destroyed, and Christian forces are going to get access to the Eastern Mediterranean in much higher frequency than they had previous, as the Ottomans build up this larger naval force. So the knights are still going to be very militant. They're still going to be fighting. They're still going to be participating in activities that are designed to limit or push back Ottoman influence. And they're going to be pretty big. And they get really rich off of this. They get so rich that at certain points, they actually start buying territory, wait for it, in the New World. Some of the Virgin Islands over here in the Caribbean are going to end up in the hands of the Knights of Malta. They buy 4 islands from a French company, and from about the early 1640s and into the 1650s, the Knights of Malta are actually going to have outposts here in the New World, over here in the Caribbean. They decide that it is not ultimately worth the effort because of the threat of holding these in the hands of European expansion, and they're going to end up selling the islands back to the French in the 1650s because it was just a bit too much. Just a bit too much to sort of hold on to. But one of the big things that starts up around this time period as we see European nationalization starting to happen, and especially as we start seeing European imperialism start getting really, really big in the late 16 and early 1700s, there's going to become a big argument about who actually owns Malta. And this is something that the Knights are going to have a very specific opinion about. They're going to say, we own Malta. Now, if you'll remember, technically speaking, Malta was part of the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. So that would theoretically put that in Italian control and under the control of people that were ruling Sicily. However, it was given to them by Charles V, who was the Holy Roman Emperor. So if Malta was leased to them by the Germans, do the Germans have a claim on Malta? Do the French have a claim on Malta because of how much French influence the leadership of the Knights had? What do we do? Well, the answer is spend a whole bunch of money and run yourself into debt, which is what ends up happening for a big portion of this period of time. And the argument over who owns Malta really isn't going to be settled until 1754, when they basically, the leader of the Knights says, we are independent, and if anybody wants to challenge that, bring your army and challenge it. So this is sort of like a come and take us, right? If you are interested in expressing your claim over the territory, come and take it, or shut up and recognize our independence. And during this period of time in the 1750s, this happens in 1754, there's so much other stuff going on that nobody really pushes this very much. It's just sort of a thing that kind of just happens, and everybody else is just like, it's a big old fortified island. We're not going to bother with it. Until the 1800s, and especially until the late 1700s in the French Revolution, because there's some weird stuff that's about to happen here, and you probably didn't think that people like Richelieu were going to play roles in this discussion, but because there had been such a historical tie between the leadership of the Knights of Malta and French nobility, a lot of the monetary holdings and a lot of the territorial possession that had been willed to the Knights of Malta through Christian people past was in France. But here's the thing about France in the late 1700s. France decides to go full-on revolution in the late 1700s. And when France goes full-on revolution, well, that leads a lot of different people to decide we need to confiscate all of the stuff that's owned by the Catholic Church. Because the Catholic Church is a big bad no-no. And especially by the time we get to the Committee for Public Safety, they go full revolution. I'm pretty sure that the Committee for Public Safety under Richelieu is about as full revolution as you can go. When they start renaming the months because they don't like the fact that the months were on a Christian calendar, you've gone full revolution. But a lot of the holdings of the Knights of Malta were in France. And all of that gets gobbled up by the French Revolution. What do you do then? Well, you're in a bad spot because some of the leadership during the 1700s had run up quite a bit of debt and had gotten the knights involved in a lot of questionable activity when it came to shipping and buying and receiving stuff. What do you do then? Write a musical. They could have written a musical about that. I don't know how well it would have gone over, but they could have. Anyway, they're going to be in dire straits financially speaking. At this point, nobody really cares very much about their mint because the imperial structure is just so big that the knights don't really play a very big role in that anymore. After the New World was discovered, the Atlantic becomes the body of water that is going to see most of the commerce, and the Mediterranean isn't going to be that big of a deal anymore. This is going to end up hurting a lot of the financial stuff, which is why they got involved in more questionable things anyway to kind of keep the money flowing. Anyway, they're going to end up broke, and they're going to end up losing supporters because they're not going to be big dogs anymore, and very few people want to join up with an order that is obviously broke, doesn't have a lot of money, and has a waning amount of influence. Then comes Napoleon. And you're like, well, what is Napoleon going to do? Napoleon really wants Malta. And Napoleon wants Malta because it's a huge fort. He just wants all the big, cool forts, right? So Napoleon sails up to Malta in 1800 and pretty much goes, "You're going to surrender to me." And the knight commander goes, "Yeah, I guess we're going to have to, don't we?" And so the French end up taking over the control of Malta in 1800 under Napoleon. And for the next 13 years, they're going to basically run Malta like a little bit of a colony. Of course, it's going to be a military outpost because of, fortifications and cannon and all this crazy stuff. But what's interesting here is that the people that lived on Malta are very uncomfortable under French rule. They don't like the fact that the French had so much direct control over them, and they especially didn't like Napoleon. So the leadership of the Knights of Malta is going to start working a little bit like surreptitiously, secrets, behind the scenes, and reaching out to pretty much anybody that would hate Napoleon. And if you know anything about Napoleonic history, you'll know that Napoleon hated the English at that point, who were the British, pretty much more than anybody. And the British hated Napoleon pretty much more than anybody too. And the Maltese, the Knights of Malta, are going to reach out to the English, and they're going to say, "Look, here's the deal. We don't like Napoleon very much. And if you wanted to come here and take Malta, we have people inside a lot of the big forts, and we could kind of help you flip the islands." And the British are like, really big fortification in the middle of the Mediterranean, strategically located. We have a global empire that includes places in the Middle East and places in Northern Africa. We take your offer. And in 1813, the British are going to help the Knights of Malta and the local Maltese population run out the French. There was a bit of a hope at that point that the British would be like, "Okay, cool, now we're going to form a wonderful friendship with our friends in Malta." But that's not what exactly happened. What happened, and you know exactly what happened because it's the British in the 1800s, what happened is they became a British colony. And they stayed a British colony for quite some time. Do you want me to be your boyfriend and kick out Napoleon? Circle yes or no. That's about what it was. But it was more like, do you want to be forced into a one-sided marriage where I have all of the power and you do what I tell you to do for the rest of the century? Check yes or no. And they checked yes. and the British controlled them until 1964. So marriage up until marriage until recent times, after the advent of birth control and after the rise of women getting college degrees. Yeah, so pretty much the 60s. Now, because we're specifically trying to talk about the Knights of Malta and not necessarily Malta proper, at this point we do need to diverge a little bit from the history of Malta in general to continue talking about the Knights. So when the British are going to give Malta independence again in the 60s, the Order of St. John and the Knights of Malta are still there, but under the basically 164 years of colonial rule, they had lost all political power over the region. Now, they still had a lot of political influence, but not political power. And during the period of time of colonization, the Knights of Malta are actually going to start pursuing fairly dramatic, different sorts of activities. They're going to basically give up all of the militant angle, and they're going to sort of return to a more charitable angle. Or so they say. Now, this is an interesting point here, and I am never one to completely give in to conspiracy theories, but I am one who will say things that are true. One of the things that is interesting here about the Knights of Malta during this period and their shift to charitable work is that they still maintain their independence and their recognition as an autonomous body. And they still have a lot of the same powers that a country would. And they still could theoretically, even today, make money that would be recognizable by other countries. And they can still do things today like give you a passport. You can get a Knights of Malta passport. And this is going to put them in a bit of an interesting position, because they're going to be able to have access to European powers as sovereign nations, even if they're not a group that holds land anymore. So you're going to start seeing a lot of people that are going to join the Knights of Malta for the access part. Yes, for charitable work. They do not still run the mint. And for those of you that are interested, I just extended the All Photos Challenge for another month. But anyway, during this period from the 1800s into the 1900s, they're going to pivot quite a bit back towards a charitable work, but they're going to be doing charitable work in a lot of the big cities, right? They're going to be focusing on places like Paris, London, the centers of power where people are rubbing shoulders with the people, right? They are going to move their base of operations to Rome. They're going to have a lot of people in a lot of positions. Now, I should make a crypto token for them for history, right? Sure. Multi-token, multi-coin, I don't know. Falcoin. There you go, Falcoin. So coined as a term. Anyway, somebody's going to use that now. We're being visited by a puppy. Hello, Kaylee. Would you all like to see a puppy? Oh, she's wet. She's been outside. Hey, where are you going? You gonna come see me? Hey, come here. Did you literally just walk out of the room? Well, come here. Okay, that was literally like 2 seconds long. Oh well, I apologize. I thought that she would stay around for more, but she looked at me and I scratched her head and then she walked back out. Boing coin. Anyway, so today they still exist. They're still around. This guy is John Dunlap, and he is currently the leader of the Knights of Malta. Now, they have done a little bit of reorganization, and they have rewritten their constitution to put them a little bit more back under papal authority, but they're still rather autonomous, and they're still operating today. They today have operations in about 120 different countries, and they claim that they have about 14,000 active members right now. The headquarters, again, is in Rome, but they are not Jesuits. Well, I guess some of them technically could be Jesuits, but the Jesuit order is a different order than the Knights of Malta. So the Jesuits are people that are going to follow a different set of ideologies. I don't think there's necessarily anything preventing you from being in both groups, but that would be an interesting scenario, and I don't know how exactly that would work. And now that I'm actually thinking about it, there was a whole big scandal a few years ago. The guy that used to be the leader of the Bishop of St. Louis, Archbishop of St. Louis, was originally wrapped up in the leadership of the Knights of Malta, and then he got removed from his positions, and the Pope got involved, and it got really nasty, and there was a lot of like rigmarole at the top of the Knights of Malta. But again, they still exist. And if we get back into the conspiracy theory world for a little bit, I'll tell you the claim. One of the claims is that the Knights of Malta have infiltrated high levels of government with people that are secretly working towards their own ends as global power brokers. There was a scandal about some American politicians being secret members of the Knights of Malta. There's some scuttlebutt about some of the European Catholic leadership that were like secret Knights of Malta members. It's all fairly silly. None of the actual claims have ever been meted out, and even if they were, there's nothing that particularly keeps them from participating in jobs of any other sort, right? So anyway, they're still around, and they're still, because of their history and their levels of influence and the sort of circles that a lot of them can still walk around in, and because of the seemingly odd political powers that they have, where they can do stuff like issue their own passports and stuff like that. A lot of people are like, it's the Illuminati, but it's always the Illuminati, right? It's always them. Your former governor is a member of Opus Dei, right? There we go. It's the secret group. They're out to get everybody. Dun dun dun. Whatever, Anyway, so that is the history of the Knights of Malta from beginning to end, or I guess beginning to present. DCI Banks, I hope that was everything that you dreamed that it would be, and I hope that everybody else enjoyed that. I don't think this is a group that a lot of people probably knew very much about. I find this stuff fascinating. We've done the Teutonic Order before. We've now done the Knights Hospitaller, and turns into the Knights of Malta. So that sort of stuff really fascinates me. It is kind of interesting that we haven't done the Templar, but that's fine. I honestly figured if we would have done any of them, people would have been like, do the Knights Templar. But that's, whatever. The beauty of the viewer request stream is you all get to pick whatever you want. So, and speaking of that, we actually do need to choose our next poll. And we are in a weird position because the second place position was this one from the last time we ran a poll. So if you are in the chat and there is something historic that you would like to talk about, now is the time to suggest it. So I'm going to take the first 4 suggestions for a stream, and we're going to put them in a poll, and then we'll vote on them. The Templars are like the jocks of the Catholic. Yeah, it's pretty much. I'm a member of the Order of Twitch Streamers, a secretive, impenetrable group whose name strikes fear in the hearts of boomers. I'll take that. The Barbary Pirates. Hey, why not? Because we mentioned them like 17 times tonight. Anglo-Indian Wars. Ooh, that's going to be a fun one. I'm suspecting here that you're talking specifically, Matt, about the ones that are in the late 1700s and early 1800s. Caribbean pirates. We've already done History of Pirates, and I'm not particularly interested in going back and doing subsets of pirates. I guess then I just put the Barbary pirates on there. Okay. And the Marshall Plan. Can I get an entire stream off the Marshall Plan? Yeah, I think I can. Yeah. I had to think about it there for a second. I just had to like pause and run all the stuff in my head over. I don't go into a lot of detail about that in my World Civ class, but after like 2 seconds of thinking about it, yeah. All right. So here's what's going to happen. We've got our 4 ideas. I have just started the poll. If you are in the room, you can vote in the poll, and it is above you in the chat. If you look above the chat, there should be a little down caret, and you click on that, and then you can vote. So everybody gets to vote. You do not have to be a follower. You do not have to be a subscriber. You don't even have to plan on coming back to watch the stream. There's no implied attendance policy based on this stuff. In favor of women getting degrees, you're totally in favor of equality in education and employment. I was just wondering if the addition in the supply of students can increase the supply of potential employees has contributed to the increase in the cost of education and the reduction of salary wages. Moose, that's a great question. I see exactly what you're talking about, and I understand why you even needed to couch that in a little bit of language. If we're just looking at applicant pools, the larger the applicant pool is, the lower the wage you have to offer. And that's just obvious supply and demand economics. And if we're looking at, we have a fixed number of seats in college courses, and we have a larger student body attempting to fill those limited number of seats, that's going to make each one of those seats more valuable and drive prices up. So if we're just looking at that in the pure sense of economics, both of those things looks absolutely viable. And I understand why you needed to say it that way, but yeah, I would say yes to both. And remember that everybody can vote. We're like down to a minute, and we have only got like 6 people voting. So everybody gets to vote, including you. If you're here and you're hearing me talk, you can go vote. Please do actually go vote. Because now we're going to end up with a tie in some of these things, and now we have a 3-way tie. So please go vote. Somebody please go vote. And don't do that thing where you're like going to like ha-ha vote and force a tie or something. Pick something that you're actually interested in out of these. The feminization of the workforce being related to wage decreases is well documented. Teaching and admin used to be paid well, for example. Admin is still paid very well. I can promise you that administration... there's another streamer so please go vote. There's not very much time left, and we've got like a 3-way tie between them all. So, and now 2 people have gone to vote, and we've got a 2-way tie. I don't even know how to flip. I guess we can. We could roll for initiative. Who voted for Marshall Plan? Who are the 3 people that voted for Marshall Plan? Change your votes. If you voted for Marshall Plan, uh, in chat, put Barbary Pirates or Anglo-Indian Wars. Uh, all right, so Moose, don't do that thing. And now Moose is being the thing where he's like, I'm going to pick both of them. Ha ha ha. Okay, so Tuna can't vote. Oh, you're driving. Okay, so Tuna, we'll let Tuna be the. I said if you voted for. Anyway, whatever. So Tuna's going to break the tie, and we'll do the Anglo-Indian Wars. But what that means is, if you voted for Barbary Pirates, they're going to hang out, and there'll be the potential for the next time that we do a viewer request. But we'll do Anglo-Indian Wars, and these are bloody and horrible things that include a lot of people that are really big jerk faces, and it's going to be a rough one, but it'll be an interesting one. Faux show. So this is like the when England conquers India, basically, and it'll be a lot of fun stuff. Okay, what else have we got? I think. Somebody gave me a shout out while I was streaming, like an hour ago. Somebody. Okay, so Maddie did Tradle. So we're gonna do Tradle. Let me go to the web, and let's go to Tradle. So, by the way, when I'm doing Tradle, I'm not looking at your chat. So right now, I can't see you. You can hear me, but I can't see you. And I do this because I want to make at least one guess before I look at what everybody is doing. And this is another one of these things where it's really going to be kind of crazy because we've got a tiny little income, 4.4 million. So this is going to be some tiny little island, probably in the Pacific Ocean, that doesn't have a lot of exports because the entire exports of this entire island for an entire year is 4.4 million, and I have no idea what that's going to be. But we can look at it and try to make a guess, even though I know for sure that that guess is going to be wrong. Broadcasting equipment. What the devil is broadcasting equipment? Like TV cameras? Transmissions? Integrated circuits? Metalworking? So some sort of island that has a mine on it. Abrasive powder. Yeah, so they've got some kind of mine. So a mountain island that has mines. Coins? How do you export coins? All right. Iron structures. Ethylene polymers. Yeah, so they've got some kind of mine. Okay, so mountain island. Well, I gotta pick one. Very small mountain island. Let's go St. Bart's, because that was one of the islands that was owned by the Knights of Malta. St. Bart's is literally on the wrong side of the world. I really don't know. And honestly, give me just a second. I'm going to need to go on break for just a second. I'll be right back, and I promise I'm not going to look up the answer. I'll be right back. Sorry about that, everybody. You don't stream for 2 weeks, and then you forget to do things like go to the bathroom before you go on stream. Goodness gracious. Where do we even go? Root vegetables? What's a tiny little island that's 12,000 kilometers west of St. Bart's? I don't even know. Let's take some suggestions from the chat. Vanuatu. That's going to be really big. Vanuatu is going to probably be too large, but we'll guess it because I don't really have any other suggestion. 88% we're closer, but we've got to go out into the Pacific another 3,000 kilometers. Samoa. We can give that one a guess. I'm pretty sure Samoa is going to be fairly large compared to what we're looking at here. We're closer, though. We're moving in the right direction geographically speaking. What's an island 533 kilometers south of American Samoa? Maybe the Bismarcks are there used to be some German territories out there, and I can't remember what they're called. So the Bismarck Islands are closer to Australia, I believe. Man, I don't know. I don't have any idea. No, Timor is going to be closer to Vanuatu. It'll be on the other side. So Timor is in the archipelago where Indonesia is. We are at this point, when we're this close to American Samoa, we're quite a ways past out into New Zealand area, on the other side of New Zealand, out into the quite actual south part of the Pacific, as opposed to the South Pacific Theater, which is actually like mid-Pacific. Anybody else have any guesses? Waterworld. We could cheat. How do we feel about cheating? Because I'm out of guesses. I don't know any other territory that I could guess. At this point, usually I would just Guadalcanal. I don't think that's probably going to pick up because it's just it's just an island territory. It's not it's just an island. It's not a territory. The Falkland Islands are on the other side. Like Falkland itself? Yeah, I don't think so. The Falklands are on the other side of South America. I think we're just going to have to cheat. Let's cheat. Cheating on Tradle. All right, so let's go over here. All right. Is it Niue? I don't know. Let's try this guy, Niue. Hey, we cheated and we got it. So Niue. Yay. All right, so now we're going to have to go look this up because I don't actually know anything about Niue. And we're going to have to read about it a little bit. Alright. Niue is a self-governing island country in free association with New Zealand. It's situated in the South Pacific. It's part of Polynesia, predominantly inhabited by Polynesians. Island is commonly referred to as the Rock, which comes from the traditional name Rock of Polynesia. It's located in a triangle between Tonga, Samoa, and the Cook Islands. Pretty far out there. Population of less than 2,000 at the last census in 2022. It's one of the world's largest coral islands. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so we knew that they had to have some sort of stone there because of all of the stuff that's exported. Let's look at government and politics. Wow, they have a king. Wait a second. Okay, that's the King of New Zealand, whatever. Constitution specifies that everyday practice involves government and cabinet. Okay. Premier, part of the assembly. Niue has no political parties. Interesting. All assembly members are independents. There you go, Vipers. There's a group that's taking your suggestion. They all just sort of run. Self-governing free status. Economy. What are we doing down here? 17 million in 2003, but they've gone down? What is this? Oh, okay, that's not... Their GDP is going to be larger than their gross exports. Okay, that makes sense. Industrial park is now completed and some businesses have opened. Fisheries... Trading, mining. Yeah, we knew that mining was definitely going to be a thing. Foreign aid is a significant source of income, accounting for approximately a third of their annual revenue. Wow. Offshore banking. Ah, yeah, there we go. All right, well, that's cool. I learned some stuff. Something Shane doesn't know. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you, I don't know everything. I do not know everything. Do not know everything. I couldn't see anything about the coins. I was looking for that, Maddie. That's why I was trying to look for the whatchamacallit, the economy section, because I couldn't find anything about it. Let me just search coin on their Google or on their website here. The Niue dollar, pegged with the New Zealand dollar as at par, is also official legal tender, although it is mainly used for issuing collector's coins. So the Niue dollar makes a lot of collector's coins, and they export collector's coins. That's the kicker. Yep, there we go. Niue Mint silver coins. Wow, they've got a Death Star coin. Wow, that's kind of cool. I'm not going to pay $349 for it, though. They have an X-Wing coin. I'm not going to pay $309 for it, though. That's fascinating. They have a 2021 Niue $2 1-ounce silver chibi Harry Potter Hogwarts pajamas colorized gem proof. You can get that for as low as $97. They have a Severus Snape gem proof coin. Okay, that's fascinating. That's a Gundam coin. Take my money, right? Do they have a Gundam one? I didn't see. I mean, I guess it's possible. It doesn't say Gundam on that list, but maybe they... well, I mean, we've got... Let's go to 40 per page, and maybe we can find it faster if they have one. I don't think they have a Gundam coin. I mean, they may have minted one in the past, but they don't have one right now. The Star Wars coins were commissioned by the Royal Mint this year. Fascinating. It's the Franklin Mint, yeah. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know the broadcast equipment either. I mean, I can put the link to their Wikipedia page here and let everybody peruse that if you want to, but I would have never guessed Niue. So, we all learn something sometimes, right? All right. Did anybody have any other questions or want to do anything else? Otherwise, we're going to go raid.
Yeah, yeah.
And do a raid. What you all thinking? I think I'm going to just I think I'm just going to go ahead and call it, and we'll just go ahead and go raid Aristotle. And of course, as soon as I do that, then somebody redeems something. What's in the news? I don't actually know. I haven't looked at the news. I'm sorry. Clicking crap. I was so busy today I didn't have a chance to look at the news, but we could look at it real quick. News. Let's go to world. Netanyahu blew people up. Big ol' earthquake in Taiwan. That's potentially damaging. Tehran valid response after strike blamed on Israel destroyed Iran's consulate in Syria. I'm sure that's going to go over well. Biden and Shia talked on this telephone. J.K. Rowling's in the post again about talking about trans women. Ukraine blows some stuff up. Big fire. Oh, we could talk about Istanbul. Istanbul had local elections. There we go. We'll talk about that. So, just a couple of days ago, Istanbul had local elections, and the government of Turkey is a little bit funny. Local mayors of independent zoned cities are actually very powerful. And a lot of the cities that Erdogan's party, Tayyip Erdogan is the guy that runs Turkey right now. He's got a bit of a stranglehold on the presidency, and his political party is pretty much the one that makes all the big decisions. But they were hoping that they would be able to take over a lot of the local positions that were up for election, and including the mayor of Istanbul, not Constantinople. And they lost pretty dramatically in some of the big cities. They held on to Ankara, but Ankara is the capital, and it is overwhelmingly conservative. But in a lot of the big cities that are more European, they lost handily, and that stung Erdogan really, really badly. Now, this is not as big of a surprise as the media liked to play it. I saw a lot of headlines yesterday that said stuff like, Erdogan shocked. No, not really. Istanbul especially, and a lot of the larger cities like Antalya and Adana haven't really been strongholds of his power or his political power or his political party's power for a long time. So it wasn't necessarily a surprise that Istanbul didn't vote in his political lackey. The only thing that was a bit of a surprise is how much they voted for other parties. But even that wasn't outside completely of the norm. But it's interesting because it still shows that even though Erdogan is an elected official that's verging on totalitarian dictator, there's still a lot of people in Turkey that do not agree with him or his policies, including people that are in the big cities like Istanbul, like other forward-thinking cities that have more freedoms and less crazy. So that was cool. I was happy to see that. I was expecting it. I think the news freaked out about it because the news sort of like is built around freaking out. But you know how that goes. All right, now we're going to go raid. And we're going to go raid Aristotle, who doesn't really need the raid because he's got more people than we do right now. But he's a homie, and he just got a book deal, and it's worth going and celebrating with him that he is going to be a published author. Is really pretty cool stuff. So thanks for hanging out, everybody. Let me make sure that I say thanks. As always, these are people that have supported me in various ways. You can see there the link to my Patreon and the link to my books list. If you would like to join Patreon, there's the information. Please do not feel like you need to. This is just if you don't want to give Jeff Bezos money, but you still want to support the stream. That is what this is there for. So these people don't get recognition like people that are subscribed do. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that these people help me out. I appreciate everybody. Thanks everybody again for support, but also just coming by and hanging out and asking good questions and doing all that cool stuff. So I will see everybody next time, and I will see everybody around.